Our next speaker is the guy that forced me to wear a tie today, and I guess we'll bring him up on the stage since he's probably the only other person here today wearing one. David Krajicek is the CEO of GFK Consumer Experiences in North America, and he's going to share with us his thoughts on what constitutes the new researchers of tomorrow. David.
Yeah, I love your tie too. Thank you. So what I want to talk about today is basically I'm going to extend some observations around where Kim was going, because I think that we really are at an important inflection point. We heard from a number of speakers today the notion of the evolving ecosystem, that we are living in a world where everything seems to be available, digitized, and that in and of itself creates great opportunity. It also creates great challenges because it requires us to have a real appreciation and knowledge for how we can leverage that information to drive change. Because let me speak to, where to point this. Let me speak a little bit to today's research realities, because we heard this in various forms or fashion from a lot of our speakers this morning, and I've heard from the clients that I speak to as well. The first is this notion that market research is really like empty calories, that it's great today, it's great even if I get a rear view mirror look at the market, but what about the future? What does it tell me about what I need to do today to influence success tomorrow? It's also the case that we're hearing a lot more that it's not just an appreciation that there is a real proliferation of information streams, but there is a real demand for integration. You know, well, gosh, you're telling me this, but yesterday I talked to someone else and they told me this, and then you've got this. What does it all mean? How do I tie that together into something cogent, intelligent, and something that's going to impact my business? So there is that expectation, or there is the demand that we have this notion of integration of information streams. As Kim's saying, and I agree, some of the forms of research that we do today, not all of them, but some of them will be around tomorrow. The question is, how are those informed? How do they play out with the other information sources that are readily available to us, or that will be available to us going forward? And how does that create incremental value or knowledge, really business-changing knowledge? It's also the case that, you know, we see a lot of the old school research techniques and the old school way for communicating that research. You know, big, thick decks, heavy up on slides with a lot of numbers on them. There is a real demand out there for what I call visually telegraphic insights. Insights that leap from the page because we visualize them appropriately. And it's not just about making slides look pretty. It's about really finding ways to show complex or different relationships that heretofore you wouldn't have seen in a bar chart, okay? Or maybe in a scatter plot. It's something else that creates that kind of appreciation, knowledge, and action. It's as much about conveying not just the insight, but what the action is about that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And finally, that is put all together with this need for real value creation. What I mean by value creation, it's not just the research learning unto itself. It's about how that fits into the broader learning agenda and how that impacts a business. So you've got those four real competing demands, or not competing demands, but demands that are out there for us as an industry to directly address. Now, I think one of the things that we need to do is, yes, I agree with Kim that there are some underlying business drivers that have impeded addressing some of those issues, whether it's a concern about IP, whether you're trying to get and maintain a competitive advantage, and doing so by keeping and husbanding your ideas, your thoughts, your platforms. The reality is we definitely need to move away from that. Why is that? Because we need to have this notion of value creation through both inside out and outside in integration. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that there needs to be a drive forward in terms of bringing relevant information sources into an engagement such that we create or enhance insight and recommendations on a specific project. So it's adding value, context, and a broader perspective about a specific engagement through integration. It's also the case that integration plays with this notion of outside in. That is, creating implementation-ready insights. We need to move away from this notion that the study is in and of itself what we've done. Hey, we answered the specific business objectives. No, 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 no. What we need to do is be able to start creating an information ecosystem that we can learn from, that we can continue to draw from. I was at a client, a big pharma client, a couple of weeks ago. They have spent a lot of time and effort to create a learning environment, an environment that captures and digitizes the $1 billion they've spent on research over the last few years. The $1 billion of research they've spent. And they were finding that it was what? Siloed. Even though they paid for it, they controlled it, they had it, it was siloed. So part of what we're talking about here is setting ourselves up for both inside out and outside in integration. And really, what does success look like going forward? Yes, it's going to be about sharing. Yes, it's going to be about a appreciation for how we as an industry create value by collaboration and cooperation. But in essence, I think it really boils down to three elements: technology, tools, talent. Okay. Let me talk about where we are today and where we need to move going forward. So when we think about technology, we have to move away from this notion of the engagement and move to this notion of the ecosystem. That we are creating and leveraging information that comes from sources that we've collected or sources that we obtain, but that what we are able to do is create value. We're moving away from this idea of platform-centric solutions, as Kim and Don were talking about, that are more siloed, and we need to take as a posture as an industry that we are information agnostic. Okay? That no matter where the information comes from, if it comes from a tool that is provided by Andrew, that it comes from Kim, that I can take that as the analyst, add my value to it in whatever form or fashion I have, and create those learnings. That's what we're talking about in terms of this notion of being agnostic, that the value comes from the integration and the ability to drive insight. When it comes to tools, we have to move away from this notion of data processing. Really what we need to be moving to is data mining, is having the talent and the capability to find some of those insights. It's not about big data, it's having the right data. Okay? It's not about this massive information, I press the button and insights come raining down on me. No, we're still going to need to be able to connect those dots. So the key is, do we have the right solutions? Do we have the right technology in place? Do we have the right tools in place to find those insights? Because that's where value creation is going to come from. That's how, as Kim was talking about the list of competitors that are out there, how are we going to stack up? It's our ability to be agnostic about where that information comes from and our ability to deliver value. We're going to need to move away from this idea, just PowerPoint. Yeah, just put it in PowerPoint and throw it out there, it's great. No, we need to go to visualization for insight discovery, okay? It's not about taking old school visuals or graphics and just supplanting them into PowerPoint. It's going to take us having tools that allow us to look at data in different ways and in different integrated forms in order to find that insight. And finally, most importantly, it goes to talent. It kind of broke my heart to hear Kim's story about her son. That's the kind of talent we need to retain in this industry, right? It's the kind of fresh thinking we need. We need to move away from this idea of data engineers that are just doing heavy lifting around data. What they're doing is architecting insight, using the tools to push together and understand what the relationships are. We need to move away from the deductive, right? If it's this, this means that. That's what the data tells me. No, we need to think about it in an inductive way. If this than this, more broadly. It's also the case that we need to move away from this notion of just analyzing information and looking for relationship mapping. Because guess what? The analysis we do today is probably stale tomorrow, right? We need to look at the general connections and make that what the insight is. And finally, what we need to do is have always at the front of our mind that, yes, we are researchers. I come from a long-haired, I don't have the same DNA that Brad has, but I've done research for a lot. But at the end of the day, the value that I create for my clients is about being their business partner, using research tools, not being a researcher. It's a nuance, but it's a very important one because it sets us up to be insight hunters, right? To understand and mine the information that we need to find in order for us to stay relevant moving forward. Because look, those information going to proliferate. Those channels, they're going to still be there. And if we husband our tools, if we continue with just the same old, then someone else is going to come in. So with that, thank you.
Lots of interesting thoughts there as well. Empty calories. That's an interesting way to think about where we don't want to be. Inside out versus outside in. Being infostream agnostic. What does that really mean? Do we agree with that point? And how does one drive the industry to be that way? And the whole concept I like, the insight architects. That's a great term. I've got to remember that one. So thank you, David.